My name is Emma Rivera, and 90 days ago I was worth $9.2 million. I co-owned a thriving eco-renovation firm that employed 50 people, lived in a house my kids loved, and had built something real from the ground up. Today I'm about to tell you how losing everything led me to discover the one thing that couldn't be stolen. Before we dive in, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. I trust you have done that. Now let's begin. When my husband Mark and his banker lover stripped me of everything I'd built and made me look like a criminal in front of my own employees, I thought my life was over. But sometimes the people who try to bury you have no idea they're planting seeds, and the strongest roots grow in the dark. You did this, Mark mouthed through the glass wall of the conference room that used to be mine. Alyssa Park stood beside him, her hand pressed against the door like she was blessing the building. My building. 2 compliance officers flanked me as vendors I'd worked with for years watched from the production floor. Emergency risk review, someone murmured. Derivatives exposure. The words floated through the hallway like smoke, choking everything they touched. Alyssa smiled with that hostess warmth she did so well, the one that made clients trust her with their savings. We have to protect the company's reputation, she said, as if she were doing me a favor. You understand? I stood there while they escorted me out past the glass walls, past the crews assembling reclaimed wood cabinetry, past the LEED certification plaques I had earned. Mark didn't even have the decency to look away. He'd signed the audit request himself 2 hours after Alyssa filed her manufactured risk report. They took my access cards, my office keys, even the parking pass with my name stamped on it. $9.2 million of my equity, gone. My reputation smeared with fake compliance flags, lines of credit yanked. And my own kids, Leo, 17, and Maya, 13, half believed their father's story that I'd gambled with derivatives. Mum made bad choices, Leo had said the week before, his voice flat, reading from a script I didn't write. Maya wouldn't even look at me. 3 months later, I was down to $4,200 in a personal account Mark hadn't found yet, living in my late grandmother Ruth's bungalow that still smelled like her lavender sachets and old paper. The attic was full of boxes I'd been avoiding for 2 years. That's when I decided to finally clean it out. Maybe sell whatever was up there, maybe just keep my hands busy so I wouldn't think about how thoroughly I'd been erased. But when I pried open a dented tin box marked 1965 and found a safety deposit key taped to a typed note that read, "Open when you've been underestimated," when I saw the neat row of dividend receipts stamped DRP, reinvested, I knew I'd found something that didn't make sense, something Ruth had hidden on purpose. The next morning I brought the key to the bank. The clerk scanned the old SDB number, then went very still. She called her manager over with a hand gesture that looked like panic. He read Ruth Rivera's name on the screen and his face went pale. "Ms. Rivera," he said, his voice careful, controlled. "Afraid, we need to move to a private room." He laid a cloth on the table, set down the box, unlocked it with shaking hands. Inside were more keys, ledgers, letters in my grandmother's precise hand, and a notarized document that began, "Transfer on death to Emma Catherine Rivera, contingent trust established January 1965. Your grandmother," the manager said, staring at the screen like it might bite him, "opened this account with $300. Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, and a regional utility, dividend reinvestment plans held directly with the transfer agents. It's been compounding for 60 years. He turned the screen toward me. The number at the bottom had 8 figures. The woman who thought she'd humiliated me, the man I'd trusted with my name and my business. They had no idea what was coming. Because my grandmother, a woman who'd worked as an office clerk and saved every receipt, had just reached out from 1965 to teach her granddaughter the most important lesson she'd ever learn. Patience is a weapon, and paper beats performance every single time. This is that story. And trust me, by the time I'm done, you'll know exactly how to make sure no one ever does this to you. But first, I need you to understand who I was before everything fell apart, because that's the only way you'll grasp just how blind I'd been and how much power I actually had all along. Rivera Eco Renovations started in a co-working space in 2014. I was 29 years old with an architecture degree, a husband who made me laugh, and exactly $18,000 I'd saved from 3 years of project management work. Every morning I'd drop the kids at daycare and drive to job sites where contractors were ripping out perfectly good materials and sending them to landfills. I knew there was a better way. Mark handled client relations. I handled design and operations. By 2019, we'd landed our first municipal contract, a historic school conversion that put us on the map. By 2022, we had 50 employees and a waitlist for projects. I thought we were building something together. I was wrong. The theft didn't look like theft. That's what made it perfect. It started with a refinance in 2021. Something routine, a cash out to expand the warehouse. Alyssa handled it personally, which I'd thought was a courtesy. "Just e-sign here," she'd said, her tablet glowing between us at a coffee shop. I'd scrolled through dozens of screens, disclosures, acknowledgements, the usual digital paperwork blur. Somewhere in that stack was a checkbox labelled Spousal Account Access for Joint Tax Planning. I never saw it. I definitely never checked it. But Alyssa did. That single dormant flag gave her the skeleton key she needed. Over 2 years, she built what my lawyer would later call a consent ghost. A digital trail of approvals that looked like me but weren't. She created a phantom tax escrow that pulled funds into an omnibus cash account, a holding tank where money from multiple clients swirled together before being routed out again. My statements never showed the sweeps because technically the money never left the bank, just my control. Mark's job was simpler. Make me look reckless. He fed Leo and Maya curated proof through a shared family iCloud folder. Screenshots of red-lined spreadsheets, a video monologue about Mum's gambling problem, even fake derivative exposure reports that looked official enough to scare teenagers who didn't know better. "Dad says you were betting the company," Leo had said, his voice small and hard. He showed us the numbers. When I tried to push back on a $1.8 million wire request that made no sense, Alyssa triggered the panic. Lines of credit vanished overnight. Vendors received anonymous calls about compliance concerns. And Mark scheduled the emergency audit 2 hours after Alyssa filed her own risk memo, flagging me as the liability. I didn't fight back. Not then. I moved into Ruth's bungalow, kept my head down and started collecting documents, old statements, e-sign receipts, anything with a timestamp. I hired Silas Kay, a litigator who specialized in bank operations cases, and Janine Cole, a former transfer agent auditor who spoke the language of dividend reinvestment plans like a native tongue. "Don't tell Mark," I said. "Don't tell anyone." We worked in Ruth's kitchen, spreading papers across the table where she used to do crosswords. Janine traced the DRP growth on a yellow legal pad. Silas drafted subpoenas for internal bank logs. Then Janine flipped open one of Ruth's ledgers, a blue cloth-bound book with dates running back to 2009. Her finger stopped on a page, dated March 2011. "Emma," she said quietly, "your grandmother reported Alyssa Park." A certified mail receipt was stapled there. Beneath it, a carbon copy of a complaint about unadvised cross-account sweeps and irregular access patterns. The bank had replied with bland reassurances. The issue had been internally resolved. Except it hadn't. Ruth had known something was wrong, and she'd kept the proof. Ruth's 2011 complaint should have triggered an investigation. Instead, it had been quietly absorbed into what Silas called regulatory theatre, a draft consent order that never saw daylight, a promise to enhance controls, and a polite letter thanking Mrs. Rivera for her vigilance. "They buried it," Silas said, tapping the faded carbon copy. Which means they knew she was right. The second key in Ruth's tin box led us to a different bank entirely, a small credit union in Astoria, where Ruth had kept what she called her insurance policy. Box number 2 held no money, just paper. Handwritten ledgers dating back to 1965, carbon copies of every letter she'd ever sent to financial institutions, receipts for certified mail, responses from bank managers, some apologetic, some dismissive. And that 2011 complaint, meticulously documented with account numbers, dates, and the name Alyssa Park, underlined 3 times in blue ink. Your grandmother, Janine said, holding the ledger like it was sacred, was building a case she hoped no one would ever need. But the real weapon was box number 1. The trust Ruth established in January 1965 had been funded with $347, split across 3 dividend reinvestment plans. Coca-Cola, Johnson & Johnson, a regional utility that had been acquired twice and spun off into something worth 40 times the original shares. Every dividend, for 60 years, reinvested automatically. No brokerage fees, no management costs, no marital claims because it sat outside the banking system entirely, held directly with transfer agents under a transfer on death instruction that named me as the sole beneficiary. Silas walked me through the legal framing over coffee that had gone cold. TOD means clean ownership. Mark can't touch it. Alyssa never saw it. And because it was held at the transfer agent level, it's not in any database they had access to. The number at the bottom of the combined statements made my vision blur. $14.7 million. Janine spent 3 days cross-referencing DRP numbers, dividend histories, stock splits, and acquisition records. She built a timeline so ironclad that even a hostile auditor couldn't find a crack. Silas drafted subpoenas for bank logs, internal chat records, and the full account plumbing schematics that would show exactly how Alyssa had moved money through omnibus accounts like a magician palming cards. Preservation letters went to the transfer agents, evidence requests to the bank's compliance office, and a quiet phone call to the district attorney's financial crimes unit. That night, alone in Ruth's kitchen, I opened the first letter she'd tucked into the tin. The typewriter ink had faded to grey, but the words were sharp. If you're holding this, someone underestimated you. Good. That's when you have the advantage. Don't waste it on anger. Use it for accuracy. Paper beats performance. Patience beats pride. And compounding beats a con. If you give it time. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it back. Silas called at 9 the next morning. Tomorrow at 10, we file criminal and civil. At 11, he said, his voice carrying something that sounded like satisfaction. We serve the brunch. Alyssa's Women and Wealth brunch was held in the bank's glass-walled event space overlooking the harbour. 40 women in business casual sipped mimosas while Alyssa stood at a podium, talking about financial empowerment and taking control of your future. At 11:03 a.m., 2 plainclothes agents quietly positioned themselves at the exits. At 11:04, a process server walked to the front of the room and handed Alyssa a folded document. She opened it, still smiling, until she read the first line. United States of America, Vice Alyssa Jean Park, wire fraud, false entries in bank records, conspiracy to commit financial exploitation. The smile died. The room went silent. One of the agents stepped forward and said, Ms. Park, you need to come with us. Across town, at the Riverside job site, Mark was reviewing foundation specs when 2 detectives approached. He tried to joke, Am I double parked? But they weren't laughing. The DA had unsealed indictments built on Ruth's ledgers, transfer agent records, and internal chat logs, where Alyssa had written, The spouse never sees sweeps. That's the beauty of omnibus routing. Mark was cuffed in front of his crew. By noon, the press had it. Private bank faces exposure for suppressed 2011 complaint. Potential fines, clawbacks in multi-million fraud case. Silas filed the civil emergency motions simultaneously. Vacate all risk actions taken against Emma Rivera. Freeze Alyssa's assets. appoint a special master to oversee the unwinding of fraudulent transfers. The evidence packet was clean, visual, devastating. The fake derivatives exposure screenshots, traced to a stock photo template. EXIF metadata tied them to Mark's laptop, created the same afternoon he'd uploaded them to the family iCloud folder. The cross-sweep logs showed Alyssa's access patterns, 17 transactions over 19 months, all routed through omnibus accounts using the spousal consent flag Emma had never actually authorized, and the DRP holdings, Ruth's 60-year compounding miracle, sat entirely outside brokerage custody, unreachable by any claim Mark or Alyssa could fabricate. The judge issued the order before the day ended. Unwind the fraudulent transfers, treble damages under the state's financial exploitation statute, supervised buyout of Mark's shares under court-appointed oversight. Emma's company. Emma's money. Emma's name? Cleared. That evening, the bank's general counsel approached Silas in the courthouse lobby. "We'd like to discuss a global settlement," he said quietly. "Avoid the regulatory noise. Make this go away cleanly for everyone." He named a number. It was significant. Silas glanced at Emma. She opened her bag, pulled out one of Ruth's ledgers, and looked at the 2011 complaint, the one the bank had ignored, buried, wished away. She closed the ledger. "No," she said. The bank settled 4 days later. Full restoration of funds, treble damages, and a consent decree requiring independent audits of spousal access protocols for the next 5 years. Alyssa was barred from the financial industry permanently. Mark pleaded to reduce charges in exchange for testimony and a supervised asset transfer. The special master certified Emma's clean cap table on a Tuesday morning. Rivera Eco Renovations was hers again. Uncontested, undiluted, free. But the moment that mattered happened in Ruth's kitchen. Leo came first, walking through the door like he was approaching a bomb. Maya followed, her eyes red. They sat across from Emma at the table where she and Silas had built the case. Leo placed his phone face down on the wood. "Dad made us watch," he said, his voice cracking. "He said you were stealing from the company. He showed us all these files." Maya whispered, "I'm sorry I believed him." Emma didn't speak. She stood, retrieved the dented tin box from the counter, and set it between them. She opened the lid and pulled out Ruth's first letter, the one with the faded typewriter ink. "Read it," she said. Leo picked it up. His hands shook. He read aloud, "If you're holding this, someone underestimated you. Good. That's when you have the advantage." Maya leaned against her brother's shoulder. They read the rest together. When they finished, Emma folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. "Your great-grandmother taught me something," she said. "Paper beats performance. Patience beats pride. And the people who try to bury you never check to see if you planted roots." The rebuild was methodical. Emma repaid every spooked vendor first, personally. She rehired the 2 staff members Mark had scapegoated, with back pay. Salaries stayed steady. She published a transparent internal memo explaining what had happened, what the court had found, and how the company would move forward. No splashy interviews, no victory laps, just one calm press statement. Rivera Eco Renovations values transparency more than headlines. We're grateful to be building again. The Ruth 1965 Trust launched 6 weeks later. Microgrants for women starting home upgrade businesses. Free workshops on reading brokerage statements and spotting consent fraud. Templates for opening drips directly with transfer agents. Emma named Janine as the advisory board chair. On the morning of the first workshop, Emma sat alone in Ruth's kitchen. She pulled out the tin box one more time and taped Ruth's mantra back inside the lid, exactly where it had been. Compounding beats a con, if you give it time. She closed the lid, not to hide it, but to keep it ready. For the next woman who would need the key.